Welcome once again to another episode of the Don't Just Sit There podcast. We have a guest with us again this morning. We're excited about that. I am Ryan.
I'm Aidan.
And we have with us
Mark Mathewson.
Dr. Mark Mathewson.
Doctor.
The only people who call me that are people who do so to make fun of me.
Really?
Okay, so good. Then I
Do you
mockery.
Yeah,
do you include it in like your email signature? Do you put Dr. Mark
No,
Mathewson?
I don't put Dr. Mark. Sometimes if it's an academic correspondence, I'll put PhD at the end. But other than that, no.
What does PhD stand for?
Doctor of Philosophy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wait, I thought PhD could be like a doctor. I got my PhD in agriculture.
Yeah.
So you have a Doctor of Philosophy in Agriculture. I just happen to have a Doctorate of Philosophy in Philosophy.
Okay, that was my confusion. What do I have? Just master's?
Yeah.
You
No,
have
MD.
you have an MA.
MA, Master
What's
of Arts.
MBD? Master.
MBD?
Isn't that
Nothing.
doctor?
It's nothing.
No. And MD is a Doctor of Medicine.
There's a D-Min, which is a Doctor of Ministry.
Demon. D-men.
D-Min.
Not demon.
D-Min.
That would be hilarious.
What's the difference, Aidan, between a PhD and what medical doctors get? Do you know?
What's the difference?
Yeah. What degree does a medical doctor get?
A medical degree? like, what? I feel like it's pretty obvious.
I just told you.
It's an MD.
Are you asking what the
MD
letters are?
What's MD stand
Doctor
for?
of Medicine.
There you go. Nice job.
Why is it backwards?
Yeah, why is it MD?
Same thing with PhD.
Latin?
Doctor, Latin's all backwards. It's Pig Latin.
Why does Latin call
Right,
the
Latin.
shots for us? Why does Latin call the shots in our language?
I'll tell you.
Yeah, somebody's got to call out Latin.
Yeah, someone's like, no.
Latin's had it too good for too long.
Yeah, they've been making, Well, we're in our, we did questions on the challenge of the Bible. We picked
Yeah, it was our topic last time.
Doctor's brain on it. Good.
So today we thought we'd have Mark back to do a more general Q&A. And so again, as always, your questions help these Q&A episodes be more relevant to what you're thinking about. So we always encourage you to send those to us, whether it be through comments, wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, or through emailing us.
Mm-hmm.
What's the email address, Aidan?
Right in front of me. Don't just sit there. Pod
At
lincolnbreen.org. That's way too long. Just comment on something.
No, it's not.
DTDJSTP.
Okay, so I think before we get started, though, we did a word of the day last time, didn't we?
Yeah.
And
Vertiginous. Aidan nailed it.
Vertiginous, yeah.
Oh, I forgot
Aidan
it was.
nailed it.
And I got it right. So
That's right.
I am 1 for 3. 1 for 4.
Yeah, you have 1 point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Marshall, what is our word?
Okay, the word today is hornswoggle.
Hornswoggle.
Yeah, one word. Hornswoggle.
Hornswoggle.
Yes.
Use it in a sentence.
Or part of speech,
Well,
too.
I feel like if I use it in a sentence, then it'll be
Okay, just give us part of speech.
very clear. Yeah, it is a verb. This is an action.
I'm
a
going to
verb.
hornswoggle Ryan if he makes fun of me one more time. Would that be fair? Is that a fair way to use that?
Hornswoggle.
I mean, theoretically, you would need more context to what that would look like, but possibly.
Okay, I got
Hornswoggle. Okay, what do you think it is?
it. It is to break a wild horse.
Okay. That's a creative guess. I was going to say it was when, for example, an advancing army was moving forward by the call of the bugle, but the bugler messed it up. That's when he hornswoggled it.
That's pretty good, too.
That's like bottling it when you miss the shot in soccer or something.
Yeah,
it's
it's like if someone said, "Man, he just totally fumbled it." But fumbling it when you're using a horn is hornswoggling it.
That's actually, I can believe that.
Pretty good, Mark.
About the only thing that comes to my mind is some form of deception, pulling the wool over somebody's eyes or something like that.
Okay. All right,
Wait,
Marshall,
okay.
what is
If you had to
hornswoggle?
rank the definitions of who was closest,
Who was closest?
who was least
What was
close?
yours again?
Breaking a wild horse.
Brian's out on the ranch right now, hornswoggling. He has been ever since he retired.
It's the idea of like bringing something that is wild to being domestic.
Yeah, swoggling it.
So
Yeah.
so you could have a hornswoggler. which is a person that breaks wild horses.
Or no, more general. Like someone like me, I'm growing in maturity. I was wild and become more domestic. I'm being hornswoggled.
Hornswoggled.
It's a process of growth.
You could get a PhD in hornswoggling.
Yeah, I would take that.
That's good. Yeah.
I'd be a doctor.
Yeah. So that's wrong.
So that's the least right one.
I mean, it's hard. I don't know. What did you say, Ryan?
I said it's when someone fumbles.
Right. You had a whole description.
The horn,
the bugle call when you're going into an advancing.
Yeah, they're failing as a horn blower.
This is why Custer lost the battle of the Little Bighorn, because the bugler
hornswallowed it. Hornswoggled it. Yeah.
Both wrong.
Wrong.
Mark, you got it exactly.
What?
Yes. So
seriously,
I get lucky every once in a while.
Yeah, a blind squirrel finds a nut.
Yeah. So to hornswoggle is to get the better of someone by cheating or deception.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, let's get to the real business at hand. No more.
Let's start with
shenanigans.
Let's stop the shenanigans.
Yeah.
So we'll start with a light question. Okay. Be curious about everyone's answer to this. So recently I referenced that reading is a bit of a hobby of mine. And so someone wrote in and said, are there any book recommendations from what we have been reading recently? So I'd be curious to hear either what you are currently reading or something that you would recommend that you've read in the past, 6 months.
Those are different questions. What I'd recommend, what I'm currently reading.
Yeah, and I realized there are two different questions.
What I'm reading right now is, per Ryan's recommendation, Letters to a Young Pastor by Nick Peterson. Well, it's
Eugene Peterson's son.
Letters written to his son that he compiled. A book I read in the last 6 months that I loved.
That's not the one I recommended to you, by the way.
We recommended just Pastor.
I recommended The Pastor, which is Eugene Peterson's autobiography, like his biography of being a pastor.
Oh, so if I read someone else's biography of him, is it worth reading that one then?
The Pastor is very good.
But it was just going to be repetitive?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I'm glad I didn't read that one first. I'll read that one. Last 6 months that I recommend, I read a book called Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering by Tim Keller. And he gives like he's brilliant. Like the theological implication, like what does Christianity offer when someone's walking through pain and suffering? What do other religions offer, and how does Christianity stack up against that? He had like stories at the end so it made it very real. I used some stories in the teaching I did. So if it's more just helpful to help other people who are walking through pain and suffering, but even yourself. So I thought about that book almost daily since reading it. It's a big one. It's a big boy. What about you guys? Mark's going to be like the academics of science.
I read a book this morning.
Most of the stuff I've been reading lately is, I don't know that I'd recommend. Can
you tell us what
just
book?
Because, well, I've been reading some fairly technical stuff on Torah, or the legal code, and how Jews during the Second Temple period, which is the period of time between the rebuilding of the temple after the return of exile, and in 70 AD when it was destroyed. That period is called the Second Temple period. And so how the law was understood by the rabbis and so forth. So there's this book, Torah Praxis.
What does praxis mean?
The practice of it. And how the different Jewish groups or rabbi schools of rabbis, how they would have interpreted or understood various laws, and how they understood the purpose and place of the law itself. So
is it hard within that to come up with a single definition of how the Jewish people approach the law? I would think there's no one answer to that. That's one thing. Sometimes I'll get questions, what did the Jews believe about this? I don't know. You'll have to tell me what group of Jews, because they're so diverse. It'd be like asking, well, what do Baptists believe about this? Well, again, between Baptists, or what do Protestants believe about baptism? Okay, right, what Protestants are you talking about? Right. So it's like that. There wasn't just a uniform view of that. So those are the things I've been reading lately for various things that I've been working on. But as far as recommending something, books helpful, I think, for others,
Carmen has a new book out, Becoming God's Family. And in fact, although I've read the prior 2 books in this trilogy before, I can't help but recommend reading that trilogy of books: Bearing God's Name, Being God's Image,
bearing His image,
and then Becoming, or being God's Family. So those 3 books are just, I think, very important, and again are very readable. She's a great communicator in terms of her writing. So I think I'd recommend.
I was reading her. The first one is Bearing God's Name.
Yes,
I read that one when we were going through Exodus.
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah, very helpful. Yeah, then Being God's Image, and then Becoming God's Family.
The thing that I am deficient in is reading fiction. I think that's good for us, but it's not where I naturally go. So I've been trying to read.
Wait, can I push back or ask a question? Because I'll struggle with that. Why is reading fiction good for us?
I think it, especially because it's not natural for me. I think it stretches me to think in ways and my brain to work in ways that it's not most inclined to do on its own. I'd much rather. No, I think also in terms of getting a sense of story and plot and all of these things, helping my mind inhabit a world, step into a world that is different than my own. I mean, I'm more drawn to read. Like Mark talks about this Torah book, and I'm like, ooh, I want to read that. And so I'm trying to challenge myself to read, just literature, and I think it'll balance me out a little bit,
Yeah, I try to do the same. To try to, I'll read a John Grisham novel, every year. I'll read, historical fiction.
Yeah.
I particularly will enjoy. And it helps with the imagination.
Yeah.
I think it kind of it helps you work another part of the brain, I think.
I can't relate. I tried reading Lord of the Rings and I stopped after like the 3rd song.
Lord of the Rings is tough, man. That's what I'm trying. I'm currently in about 3/4 of the way through the 2 Towers, and
The first book?
it's the 2nd book. And it's hard. It's very, it challenges me. But that's what I'm reading currently. I don't know that I'd recommend it, but I'm reading it. I'd say in that genre, though, the book that really impacted me significantly back in college, that isn't like C.S. Lewis's typical stuff, is a book called Till We Have Faces. The myth, he calls it a myth retold, I think. And man, it really, when I was finishing up my years in college, it really impacted me.
Wait, is that the one? No, The Great Divorce is the one about the bus arrives in heaven,
Yeah,
right?
Great Divorce is about heaven and hell, but Till We Have Faces is much more of it's not fantasy. The Space Trilogy is really good too by Lewis, but that kind of stuff is not my natural inclination. So I do try to force myself to read stuff like that every once in a while.
Man,
so
one day I'll get there.
Yeah. So different question. A little bit of a different question. What role does community play in someone's walk with Jesus? That's a big question. Obviously, it could be answered a number of different ways, but I'd be curious to hear what our theologian in residence would say to that question.
Especially considering you're more of an introvert, right?
Oh yeah, I'm an off the charts introvert.
So I think we'll have different answers because
I would say it's an essential role. I don't think it can be done without community, because that's the way God designed us, is to be part of his family, and that discipleship, walking with Jesus, is not just something I do individually with him, but I do as a community. We just finished last Sunday at Iglesia Berean working through the book of James. So the very last half of James 5 is about, again, if somebody is sick, call the elders to come and pray for them. If somebody is walking away from the faith, is being deceived, led astray, you're to bring them back. right? So, which suggests that we have responsibility for each other, and that we can't do it alone. We live out this relationship with Jesus as a people. And in our Western society, we're very individualistic, and that's where it comes from. But you think about the world, the ancient Near East and the world of the Bible, it was community above individuals. And so they're thinking in terms of, we're doing this life as a people of God, not one person of God. We're following Jesus together. Now, that doesn't mean there's not an individual component, obviously. But I can't imagine having to do it alone. The writer of Hebrews says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together. And he's not saying that just, make sure you go to church every Sunday. And of course, that's part of it. But don't leave this body of other followers of Jesus, because it's there that you get encouragement and correction and these kind of things to keep you on that path of following Jesus. I just think it's essential, even for uber introverts like me.
So yeah, how does that look like for you in your life, being more of an introvert?
Well, it means that I have to work harder at it.
Yeah.
To ensure that you have it in your life, you mean?
Yeah. And also to, look out for others. So part of it is, making sure that I'm available for others, for, people to point out things I maybe need to do differently. But it's also that I need to be involved with other people in order to watch out for them too, pray for them and these kinds of things. So I think it's critical.
Yeah, I agree. I would say I agree with most of that. Not all of it. I'm just kidding. I would think about my life. I'm probably most spiritually healthy when I have my guys, 2 or 3 of my buddies who know what's going on in my life. I'm opening up to them, talking about what I'm walking through, being vulnerable and open to them. So yeah, I've seen, it's almost like what's it called? A certain graph where it's like, as my community or depth of community increases, so does my intimacy with Jesus. So I agree, it's essential. And I love it. What about you, introvert? Mr. Friday Night by yourself?
Yeah. I mean, everything you guys said. I think the other thing is there's, taking the metaphor of the body that Paul uses, if I only am taking counsel with myself and I'm only experiencing life with God as it exists according to my wiring and that kind of thing, then I just think I start to get a very short-sighted or limited view of the breadth of God's giftedness in the body, the way he expresses himself. It's like when Paul says, if everyone's an I, then that's very limited. But part of community is I get to see how God's working in other people's lives, and they get to bring things to bear in my life that are unnatural to me just because of the way that I'm wired. I think it's Bonhoeffer that said there are times where something like the word of Jesus in another person, I think he says something like is stronger than it is in me. And what he means by that is I can tell myself the truth. I can read the truth. But there is something, because we're embodied people, that if you say it to me or if Mark says it to me, there is God wired us in such a way that does leave an impact at times in ways that me just talking to myself does not. So God strengthens me through truth spoken by others, and that's really necessary in my life. I think the other thing is it's just there are people that God intends that I am pouring into, and conversely, there are people that I need pouring into me. And so there is this dynamic of who am I helping? And am I the kind of person that believes I also need help as I follow after Jesus? And if I think those two things are true, how am I going to do that without community? So I think one of the problems we run into in community is often there's a couple things. I'm gonna go up on my soapbox now.
I know where this is going.
Where's it going?
One of them is forcing depth or forcing vulnerability.
Wrong.
Oh, dang it.
No, I sometimes think about the authentic Christian community is grounded in and is unified by the Spirit of Christ and the common pursuit of one Lord and Savior, right? So I could throw perfect strangers in here, but there would be an immediate kinship if they are Jesus's people in whom the Spirit of God dwells, and they are pursuing Jesus actively. I immediately have a resonance with them. I have a family relationship with them that can go very deep, very quickly, whether they are like me or not. And I think one of the things that happens, I think, in the modern church in North America is we still are prioritizing, do they like the same things I like? Do we have the same hobbies? Are our kids the same age? Not to say those things are bad. Certainly there's points of connection there. But the tie that binds is God's Spirit is in each one of us. Therefore, we are unified. And the most central part of my life, who I'm following, I share with these people. So I actually share the most important thing about me, I share with them, and therefore I can experience deep community with them. I think about this every time I go to India. I meet these guys with whom I have nothing, really nothing in common.
Yeah.
And I love them, and I'm like, man, I have so much to learn from them, and I feel a deep sense of being known by them, and I want to know them, and I love them, and all that kind of stuff happens. And you'd say, well, what do you have in common? Do you like the same sports? Do you watch the same sitcoms? And it's like irrelevant. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I think in the church we have made that stuff more relevant than the really deep reality of following Jesus. So that was my soapbox.
I like that. All right, let's keep moving on. That was a good question. That was a good on ramp, because this is about to get very different. So we've had a handful of questions about afterlife and the supernatural, but there's kind of two questions about afterlife specifically that I love to get Mark's thoughts on. As somebody who's under kind of his teaching for a couple of years, I thought his thoughts were really good. So the first one is, in heaven, how will we have no pain, sorrow, or suffering when we will be forever separated from our unbelieving loved ones?
Actually, I think Ryan has a good take on this. I'll be glad to add some stuff, but I do. Yeah, we were briefly discussing this prior, and you mentioned some. I thought some really helpful thoughts, and then I'll be glad to give mine. But I think the lead with his is.
Well, I think I'd want to start by saying obviously it's a heavy thing, and it's a grievous thing. When we were just chatting about it briefly before we started recording, my question was, if it is possible for God to be an eternally joyous being while simultaneously experiencing the rejection of loads of people that were created in his image, right? That's the reality for God. If he can maintain, which he does clearly, that he is pure love and pure light, and he is joy. If he can somehow have those two things correspond at the same time, then certainly as we are caught up in life with him forever, we can join in to that in the same way that he experiences it, right? Because clearly God is rejected, and yet God never ceases to be joyful. And so now the question is how? What is that? And I think as I consider heaven, while simultaneously there are people that I know have rejected God, the way I think about it, I'd be curious to hear. I'll pass it back to Mark,
or my thoughts.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I am. Aidan. I guess my thought is that to use a metaphor, like the brightness of the sun and the warmth of the sun, that is being in God's presence, so far eclipses the sense of sadness and pain. There is a grief there, but it's so far outdone by the joy of being with God, that in relation to how good that is, it's not that this doesn't exist, but it is minuscule in comparison to the joy that is being experienced. That'd be the only way I can make sense of it, because I don't think it's true that
We just don't remember it.
it's always grievous that people have rejected God. That's always grievous.
Yeah.
But I think the question is that where I will dwell? Will I dwell in the grief, or will I dwell in the joy of life with God? And my thought would be, no, I'll dwell in the joy of life with God.
You don't think it's a reality that we'll like somehow forget that people are suffering or people are rejected God away from God?
No, I don't think so. And I think for me, it would be a deep, there'd be a grief that people have done that, coinciding with a great confidence that God has made the world just right, and he does not make mistakes, and I trust him. And so I think that'd be the way I'd process it.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that the life in the new creation, there's not a promise, I'll say, of happiness. In other words, just all good feelings, but joy, right? And the deepest amount of joy a finite being could ever experience. But we know, even from Scripture, and going back to the book of James, the first chapter, consider it all joy when you experience various kinds of trials. So it's possible to have, negative things, in my mind and happen, but still be joyful. And I think, we can't rule out a sense of sadness, and even as Ryan said, of grief, but that will not take away the immense joy that we have because we are in the presence of our God. And so I think that, we'll remember those people. We'll think about them. And when we do, we'll have that perhaps sense of, again, grief or a certain sadness, but it won't diminish the joy that we're experiencing.
That's so interesting to somehow be in a mind space where it's like, I'm aware, how aware will we be of the people suffering? Will we, whatever. But then what we're experiencing is so good that it won't be worth sitting on.
Yeah. And I'd add another thing that I think too, we will fully understand that this is a decision that those people have made. So there won't be any sense of unfairness of God or be angry at him for this. We'll understand this is a decision that they've made, and out of God's love, he's allowed them to make that decision. And that, I think, will play a role in at least our understanding. And maybe our understanding doesn't diminish any of the grief or the sadness that we might have, but we'll fully understand and agree with God that was the right thing for him to do, is allow them to make that decision.
Yeah, in the back of our minds, we won't be like, God, he's unfair.
Right,
it's not right. Okay, so with that, this is something I've thought about too. This is another question we have. It's about hell. What is hell like? And Ryan, off camera, you mentioned a lot of this is speculative. We don't know.
And even on the previous question, what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is you're trying to think biblically, and you're trying to make, in some ways, you're trying to make deductions based on what we know is true biblically. So this is where Mark's PhD is in philosophy, and getting into the biblical text is really important. That's primary. But then there also is this realm where you start to draw conclusions, and you want to make sure they follow from what the biblical principle is. And Now, the further out you get, the more you're in the realm of it, what would I call it? I want to be in healthy, biblically based speculation, right? Where I'm speculating a little bit about things that the Bible is not absolutely overt about, but I'm speculating according to Scripture, right? So because this is true, so a question would be, Brian has said before when we're preaching, and we would agree, in the new heavens and new earth, we'll have work to do. And you say, well, where does the Bible say that? Well, it's based on God set up the world in a certain way. And because Adam and Eve, created in God's image, were given a mandate and had work to do, and it was good. All of it was good. It follows quite easily to understand that that's pretty inherent to what we've been created to be.
Right.
And so why in the new heavens and new earth would it be substantively different than God's original creative design? And so again, you're speculating a little bit, but you're speculating according to Scripture, you know? So when we start talking about hell, we're in the realm a little bit of speculation. So that's what I meant by that.
That makes sense. So if I could put myself in this person's shoes who's asking, in heaven, how we have no pain and suffering, if we'll be very aware of people in hell, if I could guess, I'm guessing their view of hell is we're up in this glorious place, but somewhere else they are being burned alive, eaten by worms, being tormented and tortured forever. So how would you guys kind of explain that is a view of hell that's pretty popular? It's eternal torment, it's fire. But the question is the lake of fire symbolic or literal? Because you and you'll share your thoughts too. It's not very clear. So how would you explain what the Bible says about hell and how you understand it?
Yeah, I think that those descriptions are metaphorical, and that doesn't mean that hell's not real. Right? Just how do we describe this? Well, oftentimes to give the picture of something is that we use other illustrations. And so, there's talk about this outer darkness and lake of fire. And as we talked about before, you can't have both, right? If you have fire, you have light, right? So, but I don't think that that's, it's a way for the author, it's a way for Jesus when he talks to try to depict a situation you don't want to be in very graphic terms or languages. We use this. We use examples like that. I might describe an experience I had, in terms that aren't literalistic, right? But just to give you an idea, of how, awful that was. And I think that that's what's going on there. What I think is again, the reality is you have people who are dismissed from God's immediate presence. He kind of withdraws himself from them and allows them to live according to their own desires. And that's horrible. And we can describe that in terms, again, of outer darkness, or in terms of fire and these destructive things like that, worms eating bodies and these kinds of things. So
where do you the way that he focused as that coffee was spilling all over his lap was
next level.
Remarkable.
Next level.
Remarkable.
Focus. They're dialed in.
I read a book. This came up in our life group. I read a book.
Hold on. Do you want to go? Is this within the?
It's a part. It's not hell. That someone would say God's wrath is not eternal. It's not an attribute of God, so it's not eternal, and God's wrath ends when sin is dealt with. If that's true, because you describe hell as, I'm sorry to touch your leg there. You describe hell as a measured response to.
I described God's wrath as a measured response to sin.
And if one day will be, so is that true? Do you guys agree that hell is, wrath is one day ends? And if that's true, then, but isn't there still sin in hell? So wouldn't.
Yeah. And maybe let me rephrase the question. because many people will put it like this. Okay, how can it be fair for God to punish someone eternally?
Right. Yeah, that's what I've
for
heard.
a finite number of sins.
Yeah.
And I think what is being assumed there is that at death for those who are unrighteous, that they stop sinning. They stop rebelling against God.
Oh.
They're living a life of, again, God, I think, turns them over to their own desires.
Right.
And thus they live a life eternally of rebelling against God. So it's not as if God is, again, punishing them eternally for a finite number of sins. It's an ongoing life of rebellion where they're suffering the consequences of that for eternity.
But then isn't there something then why is it called, this is me just brain dumping, like the final judgment?
I think because that it's called that because there comes a final point in which everyone's decision to whether they've given their lives to Jesus or not is kind of put in concrete, right? It's finalized, right? So this is the last, chance. This is the last pronouncement of the final destiny of individuals.
I think this is speculative, right? I mean, partly,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so Lewis's book, The Great Divorce, is this idea that in hell, people are continuing on this path of divergence from what God designed. And so even though the city gets bigger and bigger, people are more and more isolated because they want to move further and further away from anyone else because they're so annoyed by every other human being, right? They're more because they're more inward, they're more selfish, they're more focused on themselves. I think maybe a question mark would be like, what do you do with? I think it's in Luke. This whole thing about Lazarus in Abraham's bosom, and you have this.
Bosom.
I said bosom the way Brian says bosom. I should have said the way I would say bosom. But this person that's separated from God, calling out, almost seeming to suggest that there is this longing that it would be otherwise. So how would that affect your answer? Because I understand what you're saying, but I just know that there also is this, there seems to be a portrayal in Scripture that what we do in life is final. That's what we're responsible for. So that even if someone would want to repent, it's what we do in the days that we have upon the earth that ultimately we're being held accountable for. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to form too much theologically on the basis of what I think is a parable.
A parable, yeah.
Between Lazarus and
Sure.
the rich man. So I'm a little hesitant about that. I mean, certainly I think people are going to have regrets.
Yeah.
But I think if I'm right about this, is that hell basically is God just turning people over to their own desires, even with the regrets.
Right.
And even, I think about even today, I know something is wrong and not good for me.
Yeah.
But I still do it anyway.
Right. Yeah, I get it.
Right. And I think, and although I don't think Paul was trying to give us a depiction of hell or anything, but I think maybe one of the best depictions of hell is at the end of Romans 1. We've in the last few weeks have studied that, where again, God turns people over to their own desires, and we see these horrible things. Even people are inventors of evil.
Horrific.
Right. And I think people are going to understand, even in that condition, that, well, this isn't good for me, but God simply turning them over to their wickedness and sinfulness, where they have no assistance of the Holy Spirit, no assistance of God at all. Their life has not been changed. They're simply not going to be able to, again, do what's right. They're just going to keep following those desires and without end.
To what degree, is it a combination? Because there is certainly people following their own desires, but there also is the presence of Satan.
Yeah.
There is demons are real.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your description of hell, your understanding of hell, where do they fit in?
Yeah, well, I think that they fit in as they're going to be among those who are following their own desires. One myth, I think, of hell is that somehow Satan is kind of running the show, and he's doling out the punishments, and the demons are helping him out. They're going to be suffering just as the others, and maybe even worse. And they're going to be not ruling there, but again, suffering that abandonment by God to their own desires. And yeah, I'm sure they'll continue the work that they're doing now and making people miserable and so forth. But I think they'll themselves will be suffering.
I think what's interesting about hell is the Bible doesn't say a ton about it.
Yeah.
It certainly is real. Satan is real. Demons are real. I do think a lot of the understanding that we have of hell is based a lot off things like Dante, right? And things like.
So what do we do with Dante then? Is that like legitimate, or is it all?
It's literature. It's not. I mean,
is
it's
it
not
grounded in?
No, I mean it's the same kind of thing. It's speculation. It's in the same way that I would say I don't think that C.S. Lewis gives me a perfect understanding of heaven in The Great Divorce. I think he can give interesting insights.
Yeah. And
insofar that they are connected to Scripture, they can be helpful. In the same way, Dante gives he's describing this journey, and it might have some scriptural allusions present in it, but it's not the definitive word on this is what the theology of hell should look like. I think that's the challenge, but that's very much in our consciousness in terms of what hell is like,
Well, so then kind of bring it back down to practically. I know a lot of people who live for Jesus or walk for Jesus out of almost like a fear of hell. And I remember being like, so what do we do with that? I remember reading some book about it. And I think, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Paul nor Jesus ever try to persuade somebody to follow him or follow Jesus out of the fear of hell. So I think I like your guys' understanding of it, because it's not just, hey, follow me or go burn alive for the rest of your life. It's like, well, okay, that's a clear answer there. I'm not saying that the way you describe hell is appealing, but it makes you kind of pause and go, do I kind of want to live how I want to live the rest of my life? So maybe hell is worth considering. It's stupid, it's foolishness. But I think that then creates, okay, so maybe I shouldn't just follow God because I'm afraid to go to hell. And I think there's a lot of, I don't know as much now, but a view of hell that is so bad, therefore just follow God because you don't want to go to hell. And I think a better theology on hell is really important, because then what's kind of motivating you to follow Jesus.
I don't think it's the worst idea in the world. But
you wouldn't say maybe you could play to start, but don't end there. You're motivating for following Jesus is just because you don't want to go to hell.
Hell is really bad.
Yeah.
And sin is really bad. And Satan is really evil. And he really wants to cause havoc to God and his ways. And so do the demons. I think the problem becomes if my following of Jesus and my surrender to God is nothing more than fire insurance,
right?
Then I am only tasting a sliver of the goodness that is intended by God in terms of what it means to be saved and be caught up in his life. So fire insurance isn't a bad thing. I think sometimes we swing the pendulum too far and we're like, we shouldn't talk about that. Well, I don't want anyone to go to hell. Hell's really bad. But the problem is if it's only about that, and I think that's where the corrective needs to come in, and to understand that there is a life that is offered that is so much better than just being afraid of this. It's just being drawn. It's being drawn to life with God. I think I don't know.
Yeah. Certainly Jesus uses what I'll call hellish language, right? About the outer darkness and these kinds of things. But I think what's important is both Jesus and the biblical authors, what they do primarily is set out two paths, right? Two kinds of life. Think of Jesus at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. Right? You have two different ways, right? And part of the motivation is, okay, where does each one lead? Right? The one leads to destruction and death. The other leads to life. But it's not merely the destination. It's also what kind of life is this? A life, again, given over to your own desires, which sounds really good if I'm the only person. But if I really think about this, now, if I'm living among people who are also just given over to their own desires, they don't care about me. Right. And I'm not going to care about them. And that's not going to, ultimately go well. But I think if you consider what this life is that Jesus offers, that one should come to see that is the life God intended, in a life in which I will flourish as a human being, despite the fact that I'm going to have to put aside my own desires many times.
Yeah.
And so I think it's this idea of, setting forth two paths to life. And which one are you going to follow? The one provides, as Jesus says, life now, right? And I think also life to come.
Right.
The other ends in destruction, and even in this life will not be fulfilling. You'll just continue to be searching for something.
That's why I liked, you said before, like humans can experience almost a little bit of both on earth, at least. Like there are places in the world, there are situations in the world that is hell to an extent. People doing what they want to do, and the consequences are tragic. And there's also experiences of, as we know, like becoming Christians and just one day I'll experience heaven. There's some level of, we can experience aspects of heaven now within the people of God. Yeah. And that's,
well, Dallas Willard says eternity is in flight now. And I think he was thinking more in terms of the, path to new creation. But I'd say that's also the sense with regards to those who are headed toward hell. You can experience a bit of that now and head in that direction now, even in this life, and have a sense of that. And I think that's part of God's goodness to us, is to give us, he doesn't just tell us, okay, here's what might happen or will happen, when you die, if you haven't, turned to Jesus, but we also get a taste and experience a little bit of what that might be like.
I think along with it's like having a good theology of sin along with a good theology of hell. And sin, we think about, we minimize sin. I think the general way, and this is maybe more true of middle schoolers and high schoolers, but this for sure is the way I felt for a while about it. Growing up in the church and in a Christian family, I would often look at sin as preferable but forbidden. Like, man, that'd be really good. My friends get to have all the fun now, but when it's all said and done, I'll be safe and they'll be miserable and they'll go to hell, right? Yeah. Now I would try to save them, that kind of thing too. But sin was preferable but forbidden. I can't do it, but man, that'd be the best way to live, which is a completely unbiblical view of sin. Sin is not preferable. It is folly. It is foolishness. It is stupidity. It leads to death. It leads to death of relationship, death of integrity. It dissolves my sense of being a whole person. And eventually, it finally and ultimately leads to spiritual death and eternal death. That's where sin leads. And hell is built off that concept, right? But we don't think of sin that way very often. And that's where I think these two paths are really helpful. Sin is absolute foolishness, but I need to really spend some time conceiving of it that way, because I think too often our world is very good at dressing up sin to look like the most attractive option. And we have to feel constantly like, golly, everyone else gets to just enjoy it. And meanwhile, I have to resist all that. But it's like, no, that's not true at all. That is absolute corruption and foolishness. It leads to emptiness.
Right.
And so I think that comes along with understanding this choice that's offered, a choice to flourish or a choice to languish, you know.
This is very interesting to me. So let's put on the pastoral hat. I'm not a pastor, so I don't have to do this. Someone walks into your guys' office and they hear you have taught about, Ryan, you taught the week before and you taught about these two ways are offered in the Bible, way of flourishing, way of sin and death. And they come to you and they're not a believer. They're living the sinful life that Romans 1 describes. Whatever one specifically they are, I don't know. And they say it's working okay for me. Like it's not. I'm not really suffering. Like I'm doing okay. I know God will judge me for what I'm doing, but like, how do you persuade somebody who are they just lying? Who would say, I am living the second route and it's really not hurting me that much. Like my relationships are okay. My health is fine. My family is doing well. My money is financially, I'm doing okay. Like, how do you pastor that person to not be like, well, enjoy it while it lasts, because then you'll be judged, or you're lying. Like, how do you pastor somebody that?
I mean, I personally, I don't know that, I don't know if a person is convicted that their way is working wonderfully. I don't know that there's a lot that you can do pastorally.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying you don't know people who are like that.
No, I know people who are like that, but I think that is the kind of thing where pastorally, I wouldn't say this necessarily. I might say it to them. I said, have you played out what these decisions look like in the long run? I understand that today, this week, I understand this doesn't seem to have a massive impact on you, but let's extend the line 2 years out. Mm-hmm. Now, consider where is that going to have you at that point? And I think that if someone's willing to have that conversation, they can understand that they're on a trajectory that is going to not end in a good place. But often, I think people are. It's Romans 1:18, right? They are, if people are stubborn and they would rather suppress the truth, right? I don't really want to look at it. At that point, I do think there is a point where you say, okay, let's talk when things get worse, because I know they will, and I need you to know I'll be here when they do get worse. I think it's really hard.
I think that's good. I think I'd do two things. One is that point them to consider, again, not judgment day, but your life as you're leading it now. Yeah. What is that going to look like in 5 and 10 years? How's this going to work out for you? And I think in terms of, this would be the case with, let's say, a nutritionist. Somebody comes and says, yeah, I feel great. I eat tres leche cakes all the time, and I'm drinking. There's 3 kinds of milks and a very moist, heavy cake. So any kind of pastries, and I drink soda all day long. That's all I eat, and I feel fine. I'm fit. And the nutritionist goes, okay, but let's think about what that might look like in a few years. Right? Consider that. Now, again, that might not do it, because we often tend to just kind of live in the now.
Sure.
Right. And so that's one thing I do. And then the second thing, and again, maybe I would or wouldn't tell them this, but I'd be thinking to myself, and I think you're right in saying, come back. I'm always here if things change, but to realize that sometimes what might change a person's mind is that some tragedy comes along and forces them now to reconsider because of the choices and consequences that they've made. And so maybe it's nothing I can say at the moment, but it might be the events of life that eventually, kind of smack them in the face and they realize, I've made a terrible choice in living this way. With the nutrition thing, my health now is just so horrible. And it's because I've been living a life of just eating garbage. And I think the same thing with a person, they'll get to a place and say, man, my life is a wreck because of all these choices I made. It seemed fun and like everything was fine all along. And I think that's where, in a pastoral sense, you're right. Instead of saying, oh, too bad, that's what you chose, to say, no, I'll be here. If things change, I'll be here. We can talk then.
I like that. Cause then it's just like, well, cause I would have had a view of like, maybe as someone like you, younger, being like, well, yeah, it's actually working out for them pretty well, but one day they'll feel God's wrath.
And I think ultimately,
they will.
Yeah.
They will. Now again, remember what God's wrath is. I mean, there in Romans 1, the expression of God's wrath is he gives them over. He gives them over to what they eagerly desire, they lust after. And sin is in and of itself its own payment, right? Sin pays out. And here's what it pays out: pain, Now there is going to be a final day and a final day of wrath or a day of judgment. There is that aspect of God's judgment that is coming. We already referenced it, but there is the nature of sin is that it will unravel. Now it might not unravel just yet,
right? But
it will unravel.
That's helpful.
I think the hard thing with, let's say, people in college or whatever is to demystify some of the common cultural sayings that sound so beautiful, right? So if it's two people that, let's say, are wanting to live a sexually active life outside God's design, they're not married, and things like, but if two people just love each other, doesn't that? And I think that the pastoral work is to say, now, hold on. Now, what do you mean by that? Mm-hmm. Now, if you really love someone biblically, would you expose them to that degree of intimacy outside a commitment that is lifelong? Like that's actually not loving, right? So it does seem like the pastoral work is to dig in and help people actually think about the things that they're saying and the things that they're doing, and to not live on this surface level cuteness that sounds deep, but it's actually not all that, So a more positive question to wrap up our time together. If God is self-sufficient, then what was his purpose for creating people? Maybe I'll just ask that one. If God is self-sufficient, then what was his purpose for creating people? Aidan, why don't you start us off here?
Can I quote your son?
Oh, you remember my story. I was going to tell my story. It's fine.
Ryan's son asked, or did he ask that? And you said, what do you think, Sam? He asked some of the question. Why did God create us?
Why did God create people?
Why did God create people? And Ryan said, I don't know. What do you think, Sam? And Sam said, because he wanted friends.
Yeah.
And I said, it's pretty good. Yeah, I would affirm God does not need anything. God does not need us. We're not here to do work for him that without us, he couldn't accomplish. So yeah, he needs some friends. He thought it was best to have people.
Wanted friends.
He needed people.
He didn't need people.
I know. Gosh.
We always have to, we need to add a new element, Marshall, where you drop the question in sometimes. We need to add like a heresy tag, where beep. Someone says something, it's a red light goes off or something.
Not true. Just hook people up to it, something to shock them.
Yeah,
that's right.
You'd be shocked.
What would your answer be, Mark?
Yeah, well, I think first we needed to distinguish, I think as you did, between needing something, wanting something, or just the enjoyment of something. I think we could ask this about just creation in general. Is, okay, well, why did God even create the earth? And I don't think it was just to give humans a place to live on. I think God create for his enjoyment. And just because you do something to enjoy it doesn't mean that I need it, right? That I'm going to be less, he's going to be less of God, right? This is what we mean by it being, essential. There's nothing essential to God that he would need this to make himself better, different, or fulfilled, but he enjoyed it. And I think too, even the idea of having friendship with those who image God enjoyed that and wanted to create humans to work alongside with him on this project of expanding the garden across the earth, and God just found, I think, delight in that. We're not specifically, again, this is one of these things, we're not specifically told necessarily God's motives for this, but I think, yeah, God just enjoyed this and enjoyed creating creatures who are like him in a certain way that he can work with and have a relationship with, not because God was lacking. I just enjoyed it. Lots of things that I do and you do, other people do out of enjoyment. But if I didn't do those, it wouldn't be like, well, my life's ruined. It's over. I can't, just my life doesn't have the meaning. There's stuff we do to enjoy. And I think that's true of God.
I think, God has no needs. What was he doing before he created? Living in perfect community within himself. Father, Son, and Spirit eternally coexisting. And so, Mike, I have wondered before, and I've thought about that. What was his motivation? And the only answer I can come up with is love. Love. He created out of love. And God's love is so great and so complete that he was compelled to create others whom he could love. That's how full his love is and how good his love is. And so out of love, he created others so that they might enjoy him and the fullness of who he is. Like I sometimes think, I backpacked Europe when I was just got done with college. And I went with a guy, and he was a friend, but not like a deep, lifelong friend. He's a great guy. We had a good time together. But there were a number of times I remember standing in Rome and looking at the Colosseum and feeling incredibly lonely because I'm looking at something that was just magnificent. And I remember my deepest longing at that moment was to share it with people I loved. It was just a postcard otherwise. I'm like, it's nice, but everything in me wants to enjoy this with others. And I sometimes think that God, in his magnificence, was so enthused in his enjoyment of himself that in love, he said, I need to bring others. I want to bring others. I'm compelled out of love to bring others into this blissful moment that is the enjoyment of me. And so he did.
Yeah, that's good.
Created others that they might just savor him because he's that good,
Which then makes, as we talked about earlier too, makes the fact that people rejected him so much more like, from our view, more of a sting because he didn't have to create us. And then he did. And it's like, listen, I want people to enjoy me. And people are like, no. Yeah. But that hits different for me. That hits different means like it impacts me differently.
Oh, is that what the kids say?
You old folk, hits different.
Why don't you wrap us up here, Aidan?
That was good. Thanks, Mark.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mark. Thanks to Mark for joining us.
Thanks, Mark.
Now, Mark again, let me just say, Mark is phenomenal. You're way more than a resource, but you are a resource, and your ministry is to help people think about and consider these things. And so he's always willing to, for sure, answer emails, but also sit down, have coffee, talk about these things, whatever might be bothering you. If you really are inclined to go deep on these things, he'd love to do that with you. So thanks to him.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll see you next time.